The rain fell in jagged sheets, slamming against the pavement like the fists of a merciless hand. Streetlights flickered, struggling to cut through the darkness, casting long shadows across the empty road. On the corner, a small figure huddled beneath a soaked hoodie, trembling not just from the cold, but from fear that ran deeper than the storm. The boy's eyes, wide and frantic, scanned the street, every drop of rain reflecting a silent plea for someone, anyone, to intervene. From the corner of his eye, he saw it, tires crunching against the gravel, headlights slicing through the night like daggers. A black SUV emerged from the mist, slow but deliberate, and he knew before it even stopped. The doors opened, and the heavy boots of a man, the kind whose presence demanded obedience, hit the puddles with a threatening rhythm. This was no ordinary visitor. This was the stepdad. The man who had been denied access, whose fury had festered in silence, now standing there with custody papers clutched like a weapon. The boy's breath caught. He turned to run, but every instinct told him he had nowhere to hide. The street was empty. The world felt as though it had abandoned him. And then, through the downpour, he heard it, the low, distant rumble of engines, like thunder rolling across the asphalt. Shadows emerged from the mist, silhouettes of men on roaring motorcycles, their lights cutting through the darkness like swords. Each one carried an unspoken promise: justice, protection, retribution. His heart thudded violently against his chest, hope and fear wrestling in the same heartbeat. Could these strangers, these bikers with eyes like steel and hearts like fire, actually stop him? Could they turn this nightmare upside down before it swallowed him whole? The stepdad's eyes narrowed, calculating. The rain didn't dampen the anger radiating off him. If anything, it made him sharper, more dangerous. He took a step forward, papers shaking in his hand, and a cruel smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. But then, another roar of engines, closer this time, shaking the puddles beneath his feet, reminded him that tonight, the street belonged to someone else. Somewhere between fear and hope, the boy realized this: he wasn't alone. And for the first time in a long while, maybe he wouldn't be taken without a fight. Ethan had always been careful. At 10 years old, he'd learned the art of disappearing into the shadows, of smiling when he had nothing to be happy about, of pretending the pain didn't exist. Life at home had been a minefield, each step measured, every word weighed. His mother had tried, God, she had tried, but the moment she remarried, their home became a place where fear whispered from every corner. His stepdad, Mark, had a presence that didn't just fill a room, it consumed it. Ethan remembered the first time he'd seen that side of him, a hand slammed against a wall so hard the picture frames rattled, a voice that cut through the air like a knife. Mark didn't just punish, he controlled. He isolated. He made rules that had no reason, no rhyme, only the weight of his temper. Ethan learned to tiptoe, to hold his tongue, to disappear in plain sight. School was supposed to be an escape, but even there, he carried the marks of his battles, bruises hidden beneath long sleeves, the careful way he moved to avoid suspicion. Teachers whispered concerns he couldn't voice, classmates asked questions he couldn't answer. Inside, he carried a storm of shame and fear, the kind that made nights endless and mornings unbearable. His mother loved him fiercely, but she was trapped in a cage of her own making, a web of legal battles and threats that left her powerless. Mark had tried once before to take Ethan by force, but a last-minute court ruling had kept them safe, for now. Yet the threat never left. It lurked in every call, every glance, every shadow outside the window. Ethan's world shrank to a rhythm of survival: eat, study, hide, sleep. Simple, silent, lonely. His heart yearned for someone to see him, not the scared boy, not the bruised boy, but the boy who laughed quietly when he thought no one was looking, the boy who dreamed of a life where fear didn't dictate every step. But tonight was different. He sensed it in his bones. The papers Mark had clutched before, the custody order, were a weapon, a legal hammer that could erase his life in a single strike. And the thought of being torn away, dragged into that cold, controlling world again, was more than fear. It was terror. He had no one to call. No one he trusted completely. His mother's voice, frantic on the phone earlier, was the last tether to hope, but it trembled with desperation. It was a voice he wanted to cling to, but even that felt fragile, like a candle in the wind. And yet, something had shifted. The distant rumble of motorcycles, once just a sound carried by the storm, had grown louder, sharper, resolute. It was a heartbeat in the night, steady and unwavering. Ethan didn't understand who these men were yet, but he knew one thing: they weren't just passing through. They were here for him. As lightning split the sky, illuminating the slick streets and the empty playground across the road, Ethan felt the first flicker of something he hadn't felt in years: courage. Not the kind that erased fear, but the kind that whispered in your ear, "You might survive this. You might get through." And in that whisper, amidst the storm and shadows, he allowed himself a single, trembling thought: maybe, just maybe, tonight, he wouldn't have to face Mark alone. Mark's SUV rolled closer, tires hissing over the wet asphalt. Each movement was deliberate, calculated, a predator closing in on its prey. He didn't hurry, there was no need. Control was his weapon, and fear was his ally. With every step, every glance, he reminded the world that he could take what he wanted, no matter the law, no matter the cries of a child. Ethan backed against a lamppost, his hoodie soaked, hands trembling. The papers in Mark's hand weren't just legal, they were a declaration of dominance. "Come on, Ethan," Mark's voice called, smooth and menacing, "let's not make this difficult." The words slithered into Ethan's chest like ice, freezing his movements, freezing his hope. The wind carried a faint, fleeting sense of help, rumbling engines in the distance, but it felt too far away, almost unreal. Mark noticed the boy's hesitation, smirk widening, confident that his shadow would engulf Ethan before any miracle could arrive. His foot kicked a puddle, sending water splashing toward the boy, a small, cruel demonstration: there's nowhere to run. Inside Ethan's mind, panic built like a rising tide. Memories of past threats, slaps, and screams intertwined with the present. The world had become a series of locked doors, and now, tonight, Mark held the key. Legal paper in hand, he had legitimacy on his side, but the real power came from the fear he inspired. He stepped forward, closer, and Ethan's legs quivered. Every instinct screamed, run, hide, scream, but none of it mattered if Mark caught him. The boy's breaths came shallow, rapid, desperate. The night seemed endless, the rain relentless. Somewhere deep in the distance, the low rumble of engines persisted, but it was faint, almost a phantom, as if hope itself was fragile and fleeting. Mark raised his voice slightly, an edge of impatience creeping in. "Stop hiding, Ethan. This is your life now. You belong with me." His words weren't just threats, they were ownership, a cruel reminder that, for now, the world allowed monsters like him to walk freely. And then, a sudden flash of headlights, brighter and closer than before, cutting through the darkness. The engines grew louder, vibrations shaking the asphalt beneath Ethan's feet. Mark's confident smirk faltered just for a fraction of a second. Something had arrived. Something that promised to rewrite the rules of this night. Ethan's heart surged. The tide of fear met a sudden current of hope, raw and powerful. And in that instant, the impossible seemed possible. Maybe tonight, he wouldn't have to face this alone. The storm seemed to pause for just a heartbeat as the sound grew, low, steady, and commanding. Then, like a wave crashing onto shore, the roar of engines filled the night. One by one, motorcycles cut through the mist, headlights slicing the darkness, their reflections shimmering across the rain-slicked pavement. The air vibrated with power, with unity, with something far larger than Mark's looming shadow. Ethan froze, breath catching in his chest. For a moment, the storm no longer felt like the enemy, it felt like part of the stage, announcing an arrival meant to change everything. Mark spun around, fury flashing in his eyes. He wasn't a man who liked being challenged, and certainly not like this. He straightened, squaring his shoulders as the motorcycles drew nearer, their formation tight, purposeful, as though every rider was bound by an unspoken vow. And then they stopped. 20 bikes, side by side, engines growling like caged lions. Their lights illuminated the street until the shadows had nowhere to hide. Leather jackets glistened under the rain, patched with symbols of brotherhood, loyalty, and protection. These weren't just men, They were a wall, living and breathing, standing between a child and the man who sought to claim him. One rider cut his engine first. He removed his helmet, revealing a weathered face framed by a thick beard, eyes sharp but not cruel. He looked at Ethan first, and in that gaze, the boy saw something he hadn't seen in years: safety. Then the biker's eyes shifted to Mark, and the warmth vanished, replaced with fire. "You lost, buddy," the man's voice boomed over the rain, calm but edged with iron. Mark scoffed, lifting the papers as though they were a shield. "I'm here for my stepson. Legal custody. Court gave me the right. This is none of your business." The biker chuckled, low and dark, and stepped forward. "Kid looks scared out of his skin. Doesn't look much like custody. Looks more like a hostage situation to me." The others dismounted almost in unison, boots hitting the pavement, their presence multiplying the weight of resistance. They didn't need weapons. They didn't need threats. Their sheer unity spoke volumes, an army of fathers, brothers, protectors, men who had seen the worst of the world and vowed not to let it touch the innocent when they could stop it. Ethan's wide eyes darted from one biker to another, watching them line up, forming a barrier between him and Mark. For the first time, he felt the impossible. He felt chosen. Protected. The leader tilted his head, rain running down his beard. "Here's how it's gonna go. The boy stays right there. You want him? You go through us." The thunder rolled overhead, but it was nothing compared to the roar that followed as one by one, the bikers revved their engines again, the sound shaking windows, rattling hearts, a chorus of defiance. It wasn't just noise, it was a declaration: "You will not pass." Mark's confidence flickered. He clutched the papers tighter, realizing that words on a page meant little against men who lived by loyalty, by honor. These weren't bystanders. These weren't cowards. They were a wall of steel and fire, and tonight, they'd decided Ethan was family. And family was worth fighting for. The rain turned heavier, pounding the pavement like war drums. The storm became the backdrop to a standoff neither side could walk away from. Ethan, still pressed against the lamppost, clutched the fabric of his hoodie, his knuckles white, his chest heaving. He couldn't blink. If he did, he feared the moment would vanish, that the wall of bikers standing before him might dissolve into nothing more than a dream. Mark straightened, slicking his wet hair back with one hand, his smugness creeping back. He shook the custody papers, shouting over the roar of the storm and engines. "This is the law. You're just thugs on bikes. He's coming with me, and none of you can stop it." The leader of the bikers, the man with the steady eyes and rain-soaked beard, stepped closer, boots splashing in the puddles. His voice was calm, but each word hit like a hammer. "Law? Don't twist it. Law protects children, not predators hiding behind paperwork. We've seen enough broken boys to know what you are." Mark sneered. "And who are you supposed to be? His guardians? You've got no rights here." The biker tilted his head toward Ethan. "Kid, you want to go with him?" Ethan's voice cracked, trembling, but it was louder than he expected. "No. Please, no." His plea sliced through the rain, undeniable, raw. That was all it took. The bikers tightened their formation, stepping shoulder to shoulder, a wall of leather and steel. Some crossed their arms, others clenched fists, and a few gripped their helmets like weapons if it came to that. Mark's confidence faltered, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. He lunged forward, hand outstretched toward Ethan. Instantly, the leader blocked him with a single, solid arm, shoving him back with a force that sent him stumbling into a puddle. Gasps echoed from onlookers, neighbors who had begun peeking from windows, drawn out by the roaring bikes. "Touch him again," the biker growled, "and you'll answer to all of us." Another biker stepped up, voice sharp. "We've buried brothers, fought battles, and seen demons in human skin. You think you scare us? You're just one more coward who preys on kids." Mark scrambled to his feet, soaked and furious. His voice cracked, desperate now. "This isn't over. Court gave me custody. You can't just stand in my way." The leader's voice dropped low, a thunderous calm. Custody on paper means nothing when the boy himself is begging not to go. You're not his father. You're his nightmare. And nightmares end. The bikers all revved their engines at once, the sound deafening, a unified growl that drowned out Mark's rage. The vibration shook the ground, forcing him to step back. The sound was more than intimidation, it was symbolic, a public declaration that the boy was not alone anymore. Ethan's eyes filled with tears as one of the bikers crouched to his level, his leather jacket dripping from the rain. You're safe, kid. He won't touch you. Not now, not ever. Mark shouted again, voice hoarse. This isn't your fight. The leader turned his head slowly, locking eyes with him. Every time a man lays a hand on a child, it becomes our fight. And we don't lose fights like this. The crowd of neighbors had grown larger now, people recording with phones, murmurs spreading. The public was witnessing it, Mark's intimidation crumbling in the face of brotherhood, his power dissolving in the presence of men who couldn't be bought, bullied, or scared. Realizing the tide had turned, Mark spat onto the wet ground, fury boiling but powerless against the wall before him. He stormed back to his SUV, slamming the door so hard the sound cracked like a gunshot. Tires spun on the wet road as he peeled away, his papers fluttering from his hand into the storm, scattered and meaningless. The bikers didn't cheer. They didn't celebrate. They simply stood firm until the taillights vanished into the storm. Only then did the leader turn back, extending a hand to Ethan. Let's get you home, son. Ethan hesitated, then reached out, his small hand trembling but finally finding strength in the grip of a man who meant every word. For the first time in years, he felt like someone had truly seen him, truly fought for him. And that changed everything. The storm began to ease, as though the heavens themselves acknowledged the battle was over. The rain softened to a drizzle, puddles rippling under the faint glow of streetlights. Ethan stood among the bikers, small and fragile, yet something inside him had shifted. For the first time, he wasn't just a boy hiding behind fear, he was a boy who had been defended, whose voice had been heard. The leader draped his leather jacket over Ethan's shoulders, heavy but warm, the scent of rain and road clinging to it. You don't have to be afraid anymore, he said quietly, almost fatherly. The boy's eyes filled with tears, not from fear this time, but from relief so overwhelming it made his knees buckle. One of the bikers caught him gently, steadying him before he could fall. His mother came running through the rain, breathless, face streaked with tears. She wrapped Ethan in her arms, holding him as though she would never let go again. The bikers stepped back, giving them space, but their presence was still felt, silent guardians in the storm. Neighbors lingered on porches, phones still in hand, whispering about what they had just witnessed. The story would spread, how a boy had been saved not by the courts, not by papers, but by men who refused to let injustice win. When Ethan finally lifted his head, he looked at the bikers with a kind of reverence. Thank you, he whispered, his voice small but steady. The leader gave a nod, placing a hand on his shoulder. You don't owe us thanks, kid. Just promise us one thing, grow up stronger than the man who tried to break you. Engines roared again, but this time it wasn't a warning, it was a farewell. One by one, the bikers mounted their machines, their headlights cutting through the thinning mist. They rode off into the night, unsung heroes disappearing as suddenly as they had come, leaving behind nothing but the memory of their thunder and the echo of their promise. Ethan watched them go, jacket still around his shoulders, hope burning in his chest for the first time. He wasn't alone anymore. He never would be again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us of the strength of unity, loyalty, and love.